Reenactors live in a different world. I think it's 1863. I'm sorry you had to wait in the sun, but here we are. And wanted to thank you for coming. It was a huge turnout from our point of view. I have some of your elected officials here. Can you hear them? That would like to say a few words, starting off with U.S. Congressman Frank Wolf.
Well, thank you. I'll be very, very brief, and I just want to thank Mr. Plaster and thank all the others that have really participated to put this on. We are blessed. We are blessed to live in this area. The Civil War really kind of began in this area, which is my congressional district, the first battle of Manassas, which I know you've all visited and know about, and kind of ended with regard to Virginia, with regard to this area, in this congressional district. I'm sure many of you, and if you haven't, you should attend the reenactment at the Battle of Cedar Creek. It is an amazing two-day event. The Battle of Cedar Creek is where in the morning the South won, and in the afternoon the North won. Sheridan rode down from Winchester and changed everything. But we honor the men who gave their life for both the North and the South. We were blessed to have great leaders like Lincoln, who believed in justice and freedom, and a great leader like Lee, who believed in reconciliation at the end. So I'm just pleased that we have preserved and protected the history that we have in this region. Not for us, but my wife and I, who is here with a couple of our grandchildren. We have 16 grandchildren, but for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, so they can experience 20, 30, 40, 50 years the same thing that we have been here. So Mr. Plaster, God bless him, and God bless those who helped put this together, and God bless this great country.
He's thanking me, but you've seen a lot of the volunteers around here. Head guys get the credit and the blame, and I'll take the blame for the delays, and they can take the good compliments. Next I have Delegate Randy Minshew.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I've got the honor of representing the people who live around this battlefield. And I'll tell you that I'm the son of Georgia Confederate infantry officers. As a matter of fact, my great-great-grandfather, Congressman Wolf, died at the Battle of Cedar Creek, fighting for Jubal Early's army. And so it's very appropriate for the grandson or great-grandson of Confederate infantry officers to be here this day to lay a wreath at the First Massachusetts Monument. As they would say in my home Episcopal church, it's very meet and right so to do. You know, 2 generations after the Civil War, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill remarked that courage is the most indispensable of all human virtues, because it is the virtue that is the catalyst that allows all those other great human virtues to flourish, take root, be sustained, and change the world. And to be here at the final resting place, well, not final resting place, the monument of these brave men with the 1st Massachusetts, who late in the battle drew sabers and marched under orders into a very heavy line of fire of Virginia 2nd and 3rd Infantry. Out of about 294 1st Massachusetts Cavalry troopers, only about 198 made it back to Massachusetts. So when we're here recognizing these brave men, as I say as a descendant of Confederate infantry officers, the courage that these men showed led our country to make that part of the marrow in our bones. One reason why we are a great country is due to the courage of the exemplars of people who fought in battles such as the 1st Massachusetts. So with that, it's very appropriate to be here today, 150 years after this battle took place at this time. And you know what's also great is that you can look around this battlefield and it doesn't look that much different than it did 150 years ago. And due to the leadership of people like Delegate Joe May and Congressman Frank Wolf, we can sustain places like this that are so special for our posterity. So we can come here and we can smell the battlefield and smell the honeysuckle and think of courage in action as displayed by the 1st Massachusetts. Henry, back to you.
Now Delegate Joe May.
But thank you, Henry, and I'll be very brief. Two things really give me great satisfaction today. First of all is to look out here and see Snickersville Turnpike in very nearly original pristine condition, and not without a great deal of fighting over that very item itself. And I look at Congressman Frank Wolf when I say that. I look at Henry Plaster. I know there are plenty of other people here who fought that fight, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to just walk along it and see it as it is today. The other, of course, is that I like the fact that I can come here with my grandchildren, and their great-grandfather was part of the 11th Virginia Cavalry, and they bivouacked not far from here. And it's really very, very satisfying to be able to say it looked very much then as it does today. And this is where one of your relatives fought. Happily, he didn't die. Again, just one of those really wonderful days. What better thing could you have than this section of Virginia in this sort of state of preservation and this sort of observance about some very brave men. Thank you.
Thank you. What Henry had asked me to do is just, in addition to just kind of wrapping things up, this was a special place for the men who had survived this battle because they had lost 2/3 of their men here on the 17th of June. 2/3 of their men. So when they went on to Gettysburg, and most of the other regiments were putting markers at Gettysburg because they recognized this was one of the major campaigns of the war, the 3-day battle there that overshadows the fighting here. The 1st Massachusetts would put a marker there, and it's very nearly identical to this. But this was what was special to them. It's believed to be the first marker to recognize a federal unit in Virginia. Some accounts have said it's the first marker to a federal unit south of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that that's an absolute fact. It was believed to be that case at the time. There is, if you look closely at it, and Henry wanted me to point this out, they had hoped to do this on the anniversary of the battle, on the 25th anniversary of the battle. There was some delays, and you'll notice the date has had to be changed at the very bottom to get it out here, change the date that they had hoped to have it here to the date that it was here. But in terms of what the congressman and others were talking about here, remember that the Fur House, I said, was by the time this was put up, it was owned by a man, the son of the man who had been here during the war. The father was William Fur. The son's name was Dallas Fur. Dallas became a justice of the peace after the war, but he had ridden with John Mosby during the war. There had been a lot of bitterness, especially later in the war after this. As I'm sure many of you know, the things that had gone on in the Shenandoah Valley, the war had turned pretty ugly. So for them to come out here and get a piece of property from one of Mosby's partisans, so it certainly highlighted the reconciliation that was going on at that time. And it's interesting that one of the troopers that came out here for the dedication of this, let me just read this real quick. This is a letter he wrote home after the dedication. The monument stands in the bend of the road by the wayside on land by a Mr. Fur, who kindly gave the spot to our association. Mr. Fur was the son of one of those old planters, whose home was used as a hospital on the day of the battle. We were treated most kindly by Mr. Fur, a lusty fellow of 300 pounds weight. Almost certainly he had not been 300 pounds riding with John Mosby. Mr. Fur, in speaking of the battle, said he was with Mosby at the time. He said the Confederates had all the advantage and ought to have won the day. He further said that the Yanks fought like devils. In exchange for being given this plot of land, the Massachusetts soldiers brought a Boston rocker down, which they gave to Dallas. And the word is that Dallas enjoyed that rocker very much in his old age. Probably at 300 pounds, he enjoyed it especially well. I have heard that at one time you could actually see the marks in the wood floor of the home where he used to rock in that chair. So we hope kids a little bit of the reconciliation after the war. And I just want to thank you all for coming out, enjoying this, and I'll turn it back over to Henry. Thank you very much.
They had a better control over the English language, I think. All right. Beneath a sky as blue as the field, on the glorious flag that floats proudly over a free, united, and prosperous country, we are assembled to dedicate this monument erected to commemorate an event in the history of the nation. When I gaze into the faces of my comrades in arms, when I look back nearly a third of a century, when I recall the incidents of the camp, the march, the bivouac, and the battle, a feeling indescribably tender gathers around my heart. It was strictly a cavalry battle, probably the hottest fight of the war. No such encounter, no such daring bravery has before been exhibited by the cavalry of either army. The fire was murderous. The charges and countercharges were superb and grand. They ended on this field. I've left scores of loved comrades nearly 28 years ago. Today I lift my eyes to heaven and thank God that we are permitted to live in a country enjoying the blessings of liberty and peace, where sectional feeling is unknown, and where the glorious flag we fought to save floats protectively and lovingly over those who wore the blue and gray. And finally, who will today speak of Yank or Johnny except in the pleasantry of comrades and old soldiers? Who will doubt the friendship of the blue and the gray? Who will say that the country is not united? Thank you for coming.